Hey everybody, Kendra here. If you've been following along in MC for a while, you're probably familiar with my love of designing sample courses in Rise. So I just love to hop in Rise when I'm not working on any client work and just come up with my own creative brand and make a course about it so that I can, inspire myself and of course inspire you guys with other ways of looking at this tool. So, my challenge for today, I created a brand called Demi Sol. It's named after my dog Demi, so it is more of like a vacation kind of getaway brand. So very pretty, clean, focused on photography and really capturing a relaxing mood and all of that. But my main challenge, I was just curious, could I create a Rise course that does not use any interactive blocks, those typical ones that we plug in so often and rely so much on? Could I create a course that still felt engaging without these blocks? That was my challenge. I think I succeeded, but it all depends on your own thoughts. But if you want to see how I did it, let's just dive in. Okay, so first let's just scroll through the preview version of this so you can just get a whole taste of the whole brand and everything that I put together. Then we'll dive in individually. So you come into the course and we have this beautiful header image with a big title, gets your attention instantly. We have some stylized text, a custom little continue button here. We can click on that. Then we see our learning outcomes. All of this text over here is super large and stylized and really intentional, so it grabs your attention. Notice how clean everything is as well. Then we can go into another little section, 02, Brand Voice Basics. So this is all about understanding what the Demi Sol brand actually is and how do we communicate with the guests who come into the hotel and all of that. So you'll also see I've created some sections with the new content blocks in Rise. Wanted to try that out as well. You'll see there's a really nice color palette too. That's going to be key here, as well as using high quality photography that really capture the tone that we want. Good contrast, all of that. This is one of my favorite sections, this modular grid-like layout. I've been meaning to try this for like months and months and months and just never got around to it. Never found an opportunity in my client work. So finally got to really just see if I could actually do it first, because it was in my mind, but I didn't know how to execute it. But lots of Mighty help on that one for sure. I really did leverage Mighty a lot in this. As usual, I feel like I always do, but it really shines through here. Again, we're using lots of clean backgrounds so that the content can really pop and stand out and feel so organized and well designed. Lots of emphasis on typography and sophistication there, subtle symbols and things. And you also see there's a huge difference in like the transition. So sometimes I'm really leaning on that hard straight line and all those angles. Other times I am using that soft, rounded, more organic shape that Mighty allows us to use with those transitions. Again, pops of color using very intentionally, and some fun ways I've set up the knowledge checks. So, one more little section. Okay, you made it through. Welcome to the team. More stylized text. A nice little background image to kind of close this out. That is the course sample here. Let's dive in more specifically to certain sections that I just love and really want to help you understand how I built them. All right, so when we first come into this course, you see this lovely attention-grabbing image and title. So if you follow along with a lot of our really good Rise courses that we create at Maestro, just for fun, you'll notice that a lot of our courses start with something really attention-grabbing and not dramatic, but just like exciting. Gets you kind of motivated to be like, curious, what's going on in here? Let's scroll for more. So I always like to start my courses, not always, but usually, with the title of what's going on here. Maybe it's the course title, or in this case, the brand, Demi Sol. It's large type, and then I'll add in some little text to go with it so it doesn't feel like the title is just floating out in space. And then I often will do a background image or something really cool that adds some depth and some layering to this visual. So, how did I make this? Look over here, it's the paragraph block. Might be a little bit surprising, but if you go into the content tab, you'll see all of my text is stylized as I like it. The title is the largest, of course, and then our extra text is a bit smaller because I just wanted that brand to really stand out. If I'm doing something more corporate, maybe for a client or something, I do still like kind of like the metadata approach or eyebrow heading. You always hear us talking about those, just to add in some more layers to the content. So it's not necessary text, but it just kind of helps things feel a little less empty. So sometimes at the top, instead of where that welcome to is, I would do maybe like a course 1 out of 2 or something like that and stylize that. So, one other thing I want to talk about here is just in that style tab, how I got that image in there. So, it's just in background image, and it's something that I found in the content library, I believe. I don't think I had to really search too much for it. But as I was searching, I was looking for something specific. So, I wanted this to feel very clean and warm and comforting. So, of course, I looked for softer colors, nothing too like bold or a lot going on, something that kind of felt pretty neutral all the way across so my text would read easily. And then I also made sure to use the darkest color in my palette. So this would add lots of good contrast. This is an important section that we want our learners to be able to read easily. They don't want to be greeted with like, what's that? What does that say? Let me squint a little bit. Like right when they come into the course, that's not fair. So always be mindful of your contrast in all of that. But there's that, and then I can scroll down into this little text section. So a lot of the times people think when there's a lot of text, it has to be boring and nobody wants to read it or anything. But I like to believe that if you stylize it nicely, it can have a huge impact. So of course we don't want paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. Yes, that gets really boring. But what can we do to keep this concise? But if we do have, a decent amount of lines of text, can we style them in different ways and really lean on hierarchy to make certain sections stand out that are the most important? So you'll see I have 3 different stylizings. I don't know if stylizings is a word, but I think I just made it one. Right here, so we've got this first one, instrument serif. That's going to be a larger type size. So we've got it up at 40 because if we make it tiny, it might be a little harder to read. There are more it's like it has what we call like serifs and little details in the text. So we want these types of fonts to be a little bit larger so they're easier to read. Then we have our sans serif body text. This can be a little bit smaller, and because it is so easy to read, it doesn't have a ton of detail. And then of course down here I really wanted to make this pop but not compete with the text up at the top, so I just bolded it so it feels similar to the body text but does stand out a little bit more. And then a little subtle detail that I loved, thanks to a little bit of Mighty use and the customization on the label here, is the continue button. Just changed it to ready to check in instead of continue. I think that can change things so much. And especially when you ask a question, it kind of makes you think like, am I ready to check in? Yes, let's go. Rather than just continue, continue, continue. I'm used to seeing this all the time. So of course, changed out the button color, the label, the spacing, all of that just to make it feel a little bit more on brand. All right, let's talk about the custom blocks. So this is something that Rise somewhat recently released. It's in its beta launch and is labeled as non-interactive currently. And so I think at first our team kind of wrote it off. We were a little curious about it, but we were like, what type of value does that really bring to us if it's not interactive? And just someone who values visual design, not necessarily the clicking actions of things. I just love it when things look really pretty and new and feel different than that templatized Rise look that we're so used to. I got a little curious, and I think those curiosities really were the foundation of me creating this course and leading to me asking, can I create a course that doesn't use any of the Rise interactive blocks and have it still be engaging? So that's where we're at here. So first, before I get into the custom block section, I do just want to highlight this 2-column text up here. So I included it in the learning outcomes, and then I used it as another heading here for brand voice basics. So if you want to see how I set this up, it's just the 2 columns, but the text over here is super large. I used a color for my brand palette and then italicized the text as well. And then I added some more text, the title over here in column 2. So if this ran down to 2 different lines, I would definitely want to make sure I adjusted the line height because it will space out. You want that tracking to be a little bit closer. And then with the 2-column text now, we also have column spacing. So we can adjust that too to get that desired look. And I thought this was a really fun way to just call out text really emphasize the numbers and the progress that we're making throughout this course. I think that is something that is really helpful for learners. You're always wondering, okay, am I almost done with this? Like, if it's enjoyable, you shouldn't be like so bored, but sometimes we are. Sometimes we need things to just move quickly, and it's nice to feel like you're making progress without really doing a whole lot. So, I think that's validating for our learners. But now we can go down into here, the custom blocks. So you can see that we're talking about, just the tone and how to talk to guests and what the Demi Sol brand voice is and what it isn't. So I have some examples over here, and you'll see I've used 3 different custom blocks for this, and I edited them all in this new place. So I'm so excited about this. We are always using different tools, Photoshop, Figma, Illustrator, sometimes Canva, sometimes PowerPoint. We all use so many different tools to create our visuals and our assets for our courses. And sometimes I just don't want to have to do that. Like, sometimes if I'm making really cool artwork and stuff and illustrations, I love it. But other times, if I just need something to move quickly, I need it to move quickly and I don't want to go somewhere else to create all of this stuff. So it's really nice, like +1 for these custom blocks just for this, that we have it built into Rise. I think that's really valuable here. But you'll see I have made just a couple different shapes. We've got all these things. I don't really think I need to show you how to use these and how to build in here, but just my thought with building here. So I want these to be shorter blocks. They're not totally responsive, so I do have to keep that in mind. So I don't want to build something that maybe stretches super wide or super long. I want it to be as concise as it can be. So I made a little header up here, changing the color out, adding in some brand elements, all of that, and just making it really clean and making sure that my text and the things that I want to say are just standing out and being very direct. I always talk about it. I love my symbols and icons. I think they help really just paint a picture without having to do illustration work or anything like that. It just really sets the tone and a mood. So over here, what it is, sun. We all love sunny days, right? Most of us, I'm sure. So adding in a sun icon helped. What it isn't, adding in a cloud. If you're trying to go to the beach, a cloud is bad news, sun is good news. So that was really helpful. And then I did add this funky yellow color. I really loved it, just to help set a mood too. And then of course I used that dark blue, so I would have very high contrast here. Okay, let's talk about these modular layouts. This is my favorite section in the course, and I'm just so excited about it because when I look at Pinterest looking for inspiration of websites and all of this, I always see these 6 kind of image grids on website designs. I'm like, how can I possibly get that to work in Rise? And for the longest time, I don't think it was possible, but now that we have all these mighty features and modifications, we can do it. So I've got these settings all set up here, but the first thing I want to talk about is just we're going to start with our image and text block. So super simple. And then you're just going to upload whatever image you want. I also think I found this one, as I did the others in the course, just from the content library. So nothing super fancy, just something that felt like it matched the tone of my course and the content. So I uploaded that, and I actually used the crop image tool within Rise. So usually I'll crop my images to specific dimensions for each component and stuff using a separate tool, but I decided to just do it in here and play around and see what works. So I adjusted it a little bit here and there, mostly with the height, so not too much with the width, but I was like, do I want this to feel a little shallower? What feels right? And just played with that. So it's pretty loose there. You can kind of do whatever you want. Another thing over here, of course, like with all image and text blocks, we want our text to be on the opposite side of the image, so I pasted that in. You can put a whole paragraph in here, however much text you want. That'll also kind of inform the height that you need for your image, but since I didn't have a ton of text here, I kept it very concise and short. My image could be a little shallower. So just one thing I want to know over here though, with that text, you want to change the background color. So I used a nice periwinkle color, and when I take the padding off the top and the bottom, and even the left and the right, if I go into my Mighty mod, you can see my settings here. I have the padding taken off on the left and the right, and this whole content width is set to full width. So that makes it a very blocky layout where you don't see that periwinkle anywhere around that wave image. So that's how you would put that together. You could play around with the corners too if you wanted. It probably wouldn't give the same effect. You'd probably see a little bit of periwinkle on the sides, but something to mess around with too. You can play with alignment, all kinds of things. Even the column ratio, I have it set to 3:3, so the line is split right down the center. But even if you want to play around with like a 2:4 or something, I think that could be really cool. And then alternate with like the 4:2 for the next one. That could be really fun. I'm now inspiring myself for more ideas, so maybe you'll see that in my next really good Rise course. We'll see. But yeah, if you're liking this, I just wanted to talk about how you would create the 6 now. If you wanted 6 squares or rectangles within your layout, you would just duplicate this, of course, and then have those settings basically the same. But one thing, when you have the text over here on the left, and when you have things set to no padding on the left side, the text will actually like be right on that margin. If that's what you want, cool. But that's not what I wanted. It felt a little too distant and like you could really overlook it, and just wasn't the best design choice for me. So I actually decided to align this to the right so that it would feel more kind of like it had this like little gutter gap column, whatever we want to call it, going down that center line, and it was just reflective and very equal and balanced. So that's what I did there, and then I duplicated that first one once again, just changed out the background color there, added in a new photo, and there you go, my favorite section. I hope you love it so much, and I do want to see some variations of this too. I think I'll be playing around with it more in the future, but I would love to see someone else take an attempt at it and see how it works for you. Okay, I may be biased, but there are so many good sections in this course that I just want to stop and dive into all of them. But since some of them are kind of repeated, like this modular grid, and you'll see the 2-column text coming in again, I do want to take a moment to focus more on this knowledge check here. So my first thought when I wanted to put a knowledge check at the end, I had to ask myself, and I was like, is this even allowed? I set the limitation for myself of no interactive Rise blocks in this course at all. And I was like, technically, a knowledge check isn't in the interactive block tab in Rise. So 1, I think that means yes, I can use it. And then 2, I did want a way to test whether or not learners were actually absorbing this information and actually taking content away with them once they finish this. Are they just scrolling through because they can and there isn't heavily gated content, or are they really looking through this because it is beautifully well designed and they're enjoying absorbing all this information? So that was my test, and I was like, I can use a knowledge check to gain that information and really prove whether or not learners are paying attention here and if this is an effective training. So let me talk about the ways that I styled this just to make it feel a little bit fancier than your average knowledge check. So of course I added in a transition up at the top. I wanted this to feel a little bit more calming, inviting, friendly, and a softer arch, I think, will be more inviting rather than that straight line that we've used in other places in the course. So I did that. I also made this the yellow color because I haven't used that a ton in the course. It's probably maybe the least used color, I would say. So I figured when users see that, it clicks something in their brain, tells them something new is happening if it's a color they haven't seen a ton. So that would be a great effective way to bring in that yellow. Also, I love yellow. It's my favorite. So of course I had to make a bigger appearance. But you'll see one little thing I did here. I added in the instrument serif font. And we talked about earlier, previously in this series, that anytime I use this kind of decorative, fancier font, I want it to be a bigger size. So I made sure question 01 was the bigger size rather than this text down below, because I did want this to pop first and then go into the question. So some fancy little styling tips I did, though, I want to talk about are just the background. So we've got a gradient here. And if I click on the gradient tab, you can see how I got this horizontal line in the background. You can basically do this with any block also. So I'll do it sometimes with like heading text and putting a slant behind there. You might have seen that previously. But basically you'll put the top color, so the yellow up at the top, bottom color is white, And then this is where the magic happens. So blend them out. Typically a gradient looks like that. Set it to 0 and you get a harsh straight line. And then the size just determines where it's going to fall in the block. So if you want it higher up, you'll have a lower number. If you want it farther down, it would be a higher number. I wanted it perfectly in the middle, so I said 50. One other thing I want to talk about are these fun little continue and submit buttons. So this is something I've never thought to do, so it feels very important to talk about for me. But basically I just set the background color to white because I'm using a white card background here. Using Mighty, I have the button color. You can see it is that white. And then I changed the label color to whatever I wanted. I wanted it to match the color up at the top, so it just felt very cohesive and simple. But yeah, I thought this kind of matched my branding. So sometimes I'll do like, instead of, I get so tired of seeing that solid pill shape all the time. Sometimes I'll do a little outline instead. This time I was like, what if I did nothing? And I think you can still click on that, realize you're supposed to hit it because I do have the continue button down below that does softly gate the content. But speaking of that continue button, you'll see I did the same thing here. Designed all of these buttons the same way, just changed the color a little bit so they can be differentiated. You'll see I applied that to question 2 as well. And so those are just some little suggestions that I would invite you to start considering as you're creating more knowledge checks in your courses. All right, folks, that's the course. I hope you're inspired in at least one way, if not several. But yeah, I would love to hear any thoughts that you have or how you're implementing any of these tricks, or if you have any advice or tips for me on how to enhance anything that I've presented here today. So thank you so much for watching and would love to hear the conversation about this continue.